Hi, my name is Ethan, and I'm 22. Most days I keep to myself. Clean pools, drive around in my old truck, and try not to think too much. But that summer, something shifted. It started with the color of her porch light. The waves tapped gently against the rocky edge of the boardwalk. I sat there most afternoons, legs dangling over the side, watching sun-worn families pack up their beach towels and half-eaten snacks while the sea shifted lazily below them. I wasn't part of their world. I was background, the guy who dragged chairs back into storage, who double-checked lifebuoys, who wore the same faded polo and carried a ring of jangling keys. Every day blurred into the next. The sounds were always the same: kids screaming in bursts of laughter, seagulls fighting over chip bags, and the hum of the snack bar radio slightly off tune. The smell of salt water clung to everything, and the sunscreen on my arms mixed with the chalky grit of sand. I didn't mind the monotony. It was quiet work. It kept me invisible, which most days was exactly what I wanted. Except, not always. There was a white umbrella set up near the far end of the beach, away from the clustered families and volleyball nets. It stood alone, like a punctuation mark. At first, I didn't notice it much. But over time, I realized it wasn't the umbrella I kept watching. It was the woman who sat beneath it. Always alone, always still. She'd arrive sometime after 3, lay a thin towel out under the shade, and sit with a book or a notebook, sometimes both. She wasn't like the others. No frantic calls, no selfies, no loud phone conversations. Just silence. The first few times I barely registered her, but then I started timing my rounds, so I'd pass that part of the beach slower. I'd glance her way, pretending to check the sand levels at the boundary posts. She never looked up, never waved. I didn't even know her name, but she became part of the rhythm, like the breeze that picked up around 4 o'clock, or the seagull with one leg who always circled the trash bins. And then one afternoon, something changed. As I was passing by with a rolled mat under my arm, she looked up. Just for a second. Our eyes met hers behind dark sunglasses, mine probably too wide in surprise. She didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just looked, then returned her gaze to the page. I kept walking, but my chest felt different, like something had tapped from the inside. It wasn't a big moment, nothing cinematic, but all through the evening, even as I hosed down the last row of benches and locked the rental shack, that one glance stayed with me. She looked away like nothing happened. But something had. The sky wasn't as bright that afternoon. I remember thinking it might rain. The clouds hung heavy and low, and the wind had picked up enough to send the lighter umbrellas flapping. The lifeguard's loudspeaker crackled with a warning about rip currents, but most people ignored it, as they usually did. I stood near the edge of the boardwalk, one foot resting on the low wooden railing, sipping from a bottle of water that had gone warm. She wasn't at her usual spot yet. I kept pretending not to care. 10 minutes later, the white umbrella appeared like always. She arrived alone again, same beach bag, same slow movements. But instead of settling down with a notebook or book, she walked straight toward the shoreline. No towel, no ritual, just the ocean. I watched her step into the water, deliberate and calm. She waded in deeper than usual, waist, then chest. I wondered if she swam often, or just stood in the shallows to feel something different. Something colder. The waves were rougher than they looked. I knew that. I'd been warned not to go in today unless it was absolutely necessary. It happened fast. One moment she was upright, and the next her body tilted sideways, her arms slicing unevenly through the water. I saw her mouth open, not in a scream, just an inhale too quick to be controlled. Her hand reached out aimless. Then, nothing. I dropped the bottle, kicked off my shoes and ran. The water hit my chest in a slap. The current dragged hard like a tug from underneath. But I saw her closer to the brake line now, face-strained, lips pressed tight. She wasn't panicking. That almost made it worse. She looked exhausted, like she was deciding whether or not to keep trying. I grabbed her arm, gently, unsure how much strength she had left. "Got you," I muttered, not even sure if she could hear me. She didn't fight it. She let me guide her back, her feet dragging slightly, her hand lightly gripping my shoulder. Her skin was cold, but her breathing stayed steady. Once we reached shallower water, I helped her sit on the edge of the sandbank. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, strands of dark hair clinging to her cheeks. For a while, she just breathed. I stood nearby, not wanting to crowd her. The wind was stronger now, and small bits of grit stung my arms. After a long moment, she turned to me, eyes unreadable. "Thank you," she said, her voice low like gravel underwater. "I'm okay, I think." I nodded. "You got caught in the undertow." "Or I wasn't paying attention," she replied. Then she looked down embarrassed, as if being vulnerable in front of me was worse than being pulled under. She didn't offer more. I didn't ask. We sat there quietly, the sea pulsing in front of us, both of us wet and strange and slightly off balance. I had so many questions. What made her walk in like that? Why did she go deeper today? But I said none of them. She stood slowly, brushing sand from her legs. I handed her the towel she had left near the chair, and for a second our fingers brushed. She didn't flinch. That was the first time I heard her voice. It wasn't what I expected. Something shifted after that. Not dramatically, just slightly enough to notice. She started arriving earlier, choosing the spot closer to the dunes instead of the open stretch near the center. Her white umbrella tilted more sideways now, as if she no longer wanted to be so visible. And sometimes she didn't even open a book. She just sat there with her coffee cup eyes on the water still. I told myself I wasn't watching her, but I knew what shirt she wore, how she wrapped her cardigan around her knees when the wind turned sharp. I started recognizing the sound of her laugh, not loud, more like air catching in the back of the throat when someone nearby said something mildly amusing. And once when I passed by carrying towels, she nodded. Just a small nod. But it stuck with me for hours. One morning, she wasn't alone. A man in his late 40s stood near her umbrella, talking with his hands too much. She laughed, but it was different. Polite, measured. When he touched her shoulder, she didn't lean in or away. Just let it be. After a few minutes, he walked off toward the parking lot without a hug, without a second glance. Later that day, I found her notebook abandoned on the bench near the snack shack. I recognized the flower sticker on the cover. I didn't open it, just held it in my hand for a while. It was warm from the sun. When I returned it, she was in the same spot, reading again. I walked up slowly, not wanting to startle her. "I think you left this," I said. She looked up, then down at the notebook. Her mouth parted, slightly surprised. "Oh, thank you. I didn't even notice it was missing. It was on the bench by the shack." "Right. I had lunch there earlier." She accepted the notebook, gently brushing her thumb across the corner like she was making sure it wasn't damaged. We stood in that awkward pause people often rush to fill, but neither of us moved. Then she said, "I never asked your name." "Ethan?" "Elena." We shook hands like strangers meeting in a quiet hallway. I almost walked away then, but something in her expression, a softness, or maybe just fatigue, kept me still. She glanced at the umbrella pole, then back at me. "Do you always work here?" I nodded. "Every summer. Every morning." She didn't say anything more, just picked up her cup and took a small sip, eyes scanning the horizon like she was trying to remember something she hadn't written down yet. I left soon after, but I walked slower than usual that day. And when I reached the back lot, I turned just once and saw her still sitting there, holding the notebook but not writing in it. I didn't see her the next day, or the day after that. The white umbrella didn't appear, and the stretch of sand near the dunes looked emptier, colder, as if the absence of her presence had taken the color out of it. I didn't realize how much I'd grown used to seeing her there, how much it anchored the rhythm of my days. I kept looking casually at first, then less so. I found myself checking the boardwalk earlier, lingering by the bench near the snack shack longer than necessary. No notebook, no cardigan. Just the usual tangle of strangers passing through summer faces already halfway elsewhere. On the third day, the wind picked up earlier than usual. It carried the smell of rain before any clouds had arrived. I was stacking folded chairs when I caught myself staring at her empty spot again. A voice behind me said, "Looking for someone." I turned too quickly. It was Mark, the guy who managed the surfboard rentals. He grinned, already distracted by his phone. "You've been staring at the same patch of beach for an hour." I smiled without answering and walked off. That night I closed up the last of the lockers and stood at the edge of the boardwalk. The tide was higher, moonlight pulling the waves farther in. I wondered where she went, whether she left on purpose or if something had pulled her away. People disappear for all kinds of reasons, some ordinary, some private. I told myself I didn't know her well enough to ask, but I missed her in the quiet way you miss a song you didn't realize you liked until it stopped playing. Then without warning I spotted something by the lifeguard post, a familiar notebook, closed with a small pebble set on top to keep it from blowing away. I picked it up, slowly, heart tapping a little faster than it should. No name on the front, no note, just the same worn flower sticker. I didn't open it. I didn't have the right. The next morning she was back. She sat on the steps of the boardwalk instead of her usual spot. No umbrella, no book, just her in a simple sweatshirt and sunglasses holding a coffee cup in both hands. I walked past once. She didn't look up. I looped back, pretending to check the notice board. Still nothing. Something had shifted. She was there, but farther than ever. I placed the notebook on the bench a few feet away without a word. I didn't wait for her to take it. That evening the sky turned a warm orange near the horizon, and for the first time in weeks I didn't stay until closing. I walked home early, the wind light against my back and her silhouette still sitting on the steps unmoving. She spoke first this time. Just one word. "Thanks." It came as I was locking up the equipment shed, late afternoon sun brushing the wooden panels in gold. I didn't expect it. I turned and she was leaning against the fence near the edge of the dunes, hands in the pockets of her light jacket. The notebook was tucked under one arm. I nodded. "You're welcome." Silence stretched between us, but it didn't feel awkward. Just unfinished. She took a slow breath, as if measuring what to say next. "I didn't mean to disappear," she said. "Sometimes I just get overwhelmed." I waited, not rushing her. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the fabric of her sleeves. "I lost someone," she added, voice barely audible. "Last year. I thought coming here would help." I didn't ask who. The word "someone" held too much weight to pry open carelessly. She looked down at the sand near her shoes. "You remind me of quiet." I tilted my head. "Is that good?" A faint smile tugged at her mouth. "It's rare." There was something about how she said it, like it wasn't a compliment, but a confession. I didn't know what to say back, so I reached into the pocket of my hoodie and pulled out a spare coffee token from the snack shack. "Here," I offered. "Free drink. You look like someone who drinks the bitter kind." She took it, her fingers brushing mine for a second too long. "Thanks." We didn't walk together after that, but we left at the same time, and that felt like something. As we passed the end of the boardwalk, I asked, "Will you be here tomorrow?" She paused, then looked up at the fading sky. "I think so." We parted ways with no more than that. That night I sat on my porch for a while, listening to the old swing creak in the breeze. I didn't open my phone. I didn't turn on the light. Somehow just hearing her voice had made the air feel softer. The next morning she was sitting on the same steps, notebook open but pen untouched. When she looked up, she didn't smile, just nodded a small, certain gesture. And for the first time I sat down beside her. She let me read a page. Just one. Her notebook rested between us, the ocean just beyond our toes. She didn't say anything when she passed it over. I took it carefully, fingers brushing the edge of the page, afraid of bending it like I might break something more delicate than paper. The handwriting was neat, slanted slightly right, like someone used to being cautious with words. It wasn't a poem, not a diary entry either, just a paragraph. A memory about a morning walk in another town with someone she didn't name. There was mention of a bookstore that smelled like old leather, and how the person she was with paused in front of a window and said nothing, just smiled, hands tucked behind their back. The final sentence read, "Some silences are more honest than any promise." I gave the notebook back and didn't say anything for a while. She didn't ask. That afternoon we didn't talk much. She sipped from a thermos. I leaned back on my elbows, eyes half closed under the brim of my cap. A few kids flew a kite farther down the beach, and the wind made it dance like it had nowhere else to be. When she finally stood to leave, I thought she might say goodbye. But she didn't. Just lifted one hand slightly, then tucked the notebook under her arm and walked toward the stairs. I watched her go, not chasing, not wondering. Sometimes things end without needing to be finished. I returned the next day and the next. She didn't. The bench we had shared stayed empty for weeks. I didn't look for her, not really, but I started bringing a notebook of my own. Nothing fancy. Just a cheap spiral-bound one I picked up from the corner store. I wrote small things. Not full thoughts, just pieces. A sound I liked. A line of dialogue I overheard. One afternoon I wrote, "She reminded me of quiet and of the ache that follows it." The last time I went to the beach that summer, a storm was coming. The sky was bruised with gray and the wind had turned mean. I stood near the fence and looked down the sand, hoping maybe, but no. Only seagulls and sea foam. As I turned to leave, I noticed something tucked under the bench, a folded napkin weighed down by a small stone. Inside, in her handwriting, "I won't be back, but thank you for making the silence feel like enough." The wind still swept through the empty bench, curling dried leaves into soft spirals where their notebooks once lay side by side. Nothing about the beach had changed, not the tide, not the light, but something inside him had. Some silences don't fade. They settle gently, becoming part of the air we carry forward. A seagull cried overhead, and he didn't look up.